G'day from beautiful Austria, and I can tell you, Carlos Sainz was very lucky to escape unharmed from a fiery inferno yesterday at the Austrian Grand Prix. I was on the scene. I'll tell you what I saw in 8 seconds' time. Let me paint you a picture. About 15 laps before the end of yesterday's Austrian Grand Prix, I'm up the top end of the circuit photographing cars zooming past at high speed. I take my last track picture at 3:08 and 41 seconds. I then decide I'm going to walk down to turn 4. So I get probably 100 metres from turn 4 and I happen to see Carlos's car pull off to the left-hand side of the track and drive up, and it disappears behind this grassy hill. So I figure, I'll go and get some pictures of him getting out of the car. At this stage, I have no idea that his car's exploded and there was smoke because I never saw it halfway down that straight. I get to a point where the car should be and I can't see it. Then I look up and see that the car's parked right up next to the opening to get off the track. And as I approach, and I've got a 600mm lens, which is a very big lens and allows me to zoom in, I start seeing a little bit of fire out of the back. Now my first pic of the car is at 3:09 and 31 seconds. By this time I'm some 50 metres from the car when I start shooting. I see a little bit of flames from the back and I'm looking around in the viewfinder thinking, where's a marshal? Surely a marshal should be on this. And a few more seconds go by and I'm still taking photos of what's now becoming a rapidly escalating situation with this fire growing. I still can't see a marshal. And then one appears. Now at the time I had no idea that the marshal had no gloves on. You can see very clearly that he's got them, he just hasn't got them on his hands, which seemed odd to me and certainly to a lot of you. If you've seen the video you will know that the car started rolling back and I could see that too. And I'm thinking, what's he going to do? He can't get out of a moving car, surely. And from my angle, I thought that the marshal was actually trying to hold the front right tyre so Carlos could get out. But of course, I'm thinking to myself, he's got no gloves on, that tyre's going to be hot. But I saw a replay from another angle and it was very clear that he was trying to put a chock underneath the car. That chock went under, but it wasn't strong enough and the car would jolt back, say, 10 centimetres and then it would grab, then it would jolt back another 10 centimetres and grab. And I'm thinking all the time, when is this man going to start putting out this fire? Because anyone who's been this close to a fire knows that your hands are going to get very hot if you don't have gloves on. Carlos is now extracting himself, jumps from the car over to the left-hand side and his feet actually hit the ground at 3:09 and 56 seconds. Now it's not for another 4 seconds that we see the fire extinguisher going off. And then a second marshal arrives at 3:10 and 3 seconds. So that's another 7 seconds later with a second marshal. The fire continues to burn until at 3:10 and 15 seconds it's extinguished. 8 seconds later, I focus my attention on Carlos, who's now sitting down just off the track and no doubt contemplating what he'd just been through and perhaps asking himself why it took so long for a fire marshal to arrive on the scene. That's certainly something that Marcus Ericsson mentioned here in the comments section of my post that I put up on Instagram. Of course, that's a valid question. Why did it take so long for a fire marshal? And should there have been more than one straight on the scene? Of course, we don't know what the delay was caused by, and until we know, we won't speculate. At that point, Carlos was checked by the marshal just to make sure he's okay. Then I moved up the back here to take the rear shot of Carlos watching his car being lifted off the track, and that was off the track at 3:12 and 56 seconds. Less than half a minute later, he walks back up because he's going to get a motorbike back to the paddock. And at that point, I noticed that the crowd were all standing in the stand and giving him a rousing round of applause. He looked up and acknowledged their applause and then promptly got on the back of this motorbike and headed back. That was my cue to grab a media shuttle. And I'll be honest with you, had a media shuttle have shown up when I was looking for one, I would never have got these photographs. I would have had a great I missed this by 10 seconds story. But then I headed back to the paddock, and as I walk back into the paddock, I see Carlos walking down with TV crews following him. Also walking with Carlos was his manager, who's also his cousin, Carlos Honoro. And after taking this picture, I walked with them a little bit, and I did actually show Carlos Honoro this picture in the back of my camera, and he just shook his head in amazement. But later on, Carlos was out with the team doing the team celebration at about 5 minutes past 6. So what do we learn from that? Well, I think the FIA will be looking very closely into why it took so long for fire marshals to attend. And there's no doubt that that marshal who put that fire out did a great job in the end. And he saved that car from further damage and perhaps Carlos's life. And I should also say that the smell from the car was awful. So how will this affect Carlos? I think these guys are just used to this sort of stuff, and come next race, he will have forgotten it and be focused on perhaps taking out a win in France. Let's get on to some other things from the weekend. Flares. Are they good or bad? There's no doubt that they can pretty up a photograph for us, but they can also ruin photographs. Here's a prettying up example, first turn with that orange glow. But on the other hand, if they're used at Parc Ferme or Podium, they tend to ruin our photos completely. They make them all soft and nowhere near as colourful. There's also a danger element with people throwing them over fences, and I saw a guy at the first turn throw an extinguished one over onto, well, near the Austrian GP sign, and I thought, what's the upside in that? And I imagine those people sitting in the stands who want to watch the start and someone lets off a flare, it's possible that they will have no vision of the start, and they've paid big money. I think F1 needs to make a decision on whether they will allow flares into the track or not, and what the criteria are for use if they do indeed allow them. But let me say this, the Red Bull Ring, I think, is the prettiest track that we shoot at all year. There are so many beautiful angles. There's the marvellous hills, or are they mountains, in the background. And when you populate grandstands with so many thousands of orange army, the photographs are really beautiful. We've talked about flares and fires. What about the winner, Charles Leclerc, making his third appearance on the top step of the podium? It was great to be out there photographing the celebration because there was real joy amongst all of the team for his win. And if you've never met Charles, I can tell you he is an absolute gentleman. I have immense respect for him in the way he conducts himself, both on and off the track. A couple of other things I love about this race is the local flavour to the outfits. The ladies are wearing dirndls, and the guys are dressed up in this sort of clobber with a lederhosen. And on one of the days we had a parade of ladies with cakes rolling down the paddock, and they were dropping off a cake to each driver. Other things I photographed this weekend, well, 2 spins. George Russell in quali, and at the start of the sprint race, Pierre Gasly was spun around by touching Lewis Hamilton. My 2 most popular pictures of the weekend, well, obviously it was the fire pic, but second was this picture of Valtteri Bottas. And this was prior to the sprint race, and I saw Valtteri taking refuge sitting against this Rolex sign. And I think it was another photographer who gestured, can you move over a bit? So I move over a bit to make sure that his head's positioned right underneath the Rolex crown, which is a photo that's often taken in various shapes and forms, but this picture did exceptionally well for me. And I did mention to Valtteri on the Sunday that this picture had been very popular, and he came back and said, how many likes did it get? And I said, 35,000. He said, how many subscribers? And I said, 350, so about a 10% hit rate. Put a smile on his face and off he went. Other popular posts of mine, Lando Norris on the back of a, well, I said scooter, but you corrected me, it's a Husqvarna 401. And thank you to the guys from Slittles who worked their magic on the picture to turn it into this. Celebrity-wise, who do we have? Gordon Ramsay was at the track for a second week in a row, and he doesn't get very far before he stopped for selfies and autographs. Such is the popularity of the TV chef. I'm sitting in the back of an apartment I've rented here in Zeltweg, which is a leisurely 11-minute drive to the track, which is a real dream. I know people have to stay sometimes 90 minutes from the track. But if you want to stay even closer, you can camp. And there are camping sites right around the track, and they are minutes walk from the main entrance. This one here I like because you can actually see from your tent the last 2 corners, albeit you're going to need a long lens or a pair of binoculars. But a tip if you're coming to the race next year and you're leaving from a car park near the track, the camping gates were opened at 8 p.m. So we needed to be out before 8 p.m. before the roads got clogged with people in camper vans and trailers. Did I have a schnitzel here on the weekend? You bet, had a couple of them. But actually in the paddock on Thursday, we had a whole host of local food laid out for us, and there was prosciutto, cheeses, even apple strudel. And in the media canteen, we're also treated to 4 meals a day. So thank you very much to the organisers. On Thursday, there was great interest from the media in talking to Zhou Guanyu after his huge crash at Silverstone. And I was chatting to one of Zhou's management team. They were saying that he was on the back page of every paper in the UK on Monday. And one of them said he wouldn't have got that publicity if he'd won. So in terms of exposure, a crash like that did Zhou no harm whatsoever. This race, I was surprised to see a number of people wearing my merchandise. I had 2 gentlemen, one in a Kim Illman t-shirt and one in this hoodie, and another Austrian was wearing my Stay Passionate hat, which I was glad to sign for him. And you can find all that merchandise at kimillman.com. And if you're looking for some wall art for your home or office, perhaps this image, this one, or this one done big, say 24 by 36 inches, on canvas or on metal with an acrylic front, you can order those at kimellman.com. Just head to the shop there and click on wall art. For all of my digital images, head to prostarpics.com, and for my best images live from the track and all during the week, head to Instagram and search at Kim Ellman. Thanks for watching.
And stay passionate.
G'day from beautiful Austria. And what am I going to tell you about?